You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jasper Schmidt.
Hello, I am Jasper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 137 of the AmWritingFantasy podcast. And we have a writing-related episode today as we're going to discuss how to maintain your story flow. And this one was one of your ideas, Autumn.
It was. Well, actually, it came off the blog. It was a very popular post there. So I thought we should do an updated content/podcast on maintaining your story flow, which is convenient because like I shared with you before we started, I've finishing up the final book of the Tainted Fae. So I wrote this, I stopped at the end of January. So, almost 6 months ago now. And I've realized I was missing a chapter. So to weasel one more, that's like my history. I will write a short book. And when I get to the climax, I'm always adding at least 2 or 3 chapters. So, but to write that next chapter that would flow and fit into the whole story after 6 months, it's a little more challenging, I think, than a lot of people realize, to make sure that it kind of meshes in and sounds right and I still have the character in my head. So those are the kind of tips we're going to look at, because it could be 6 months like I did, it could be a year, it could be just, I don't know, between one day and the next, and you just kind of lose that drive that makes the story sound like one cohesive whole. And you don't want to do that. You want the reader not to go, what happened there, when they're reading it.
Yeah. Did the author have a bad day there or something?
That's why that character died. I get it. Oh, no.
But you were already at like 150,000 words, and then you decided to add another chapter.
That was, I was counting that chapter. I knew how long it was going to be. So that's 150,000. And yeah, I was aiming for 90,000, but there's just so much going on and so many important storylines. And when you write the final book of a series and you're pulling all those together, and don't let my readers know, there's kind of a few ending things that could continue on to another book, because that's, like I said, I swear my tombstone is going to be, I'm going to have it like designed as a book, and on one side it's going to have all my information of who I was, and on the other side it's just going to say to be continued, because I will never ever wrap up a story completely, I don't think. So yeah, even this one, even though it's the final book, it's not possibly the final book ever. But yeah, it was a lot going on. So yeah, it went from 90,000 to 150. That's just the way it goes sometimes.
But that's also a good thing, because in general, if sales justify it, then it's always nice to have a few open ends that you can continue on.
Absolutely. Or if, the characters wake you up at 3 a.m. a little too often, maybe you'll continue it anyway. Just for yourself. It is, I love the characters, yeah.
Or you regret that you didn't kill that character who keeps waking you up.
I don't know, that could be worse. Then you'll have an undead character.
All right. The necromancer haunts you at night.
That's right. You gotta watch out which ones you kill off. They can come back too.
Yeah, that's true.
So how
have you been otherwise? Have you just been writing and going about all that editing stuff?
Yes, that's pretty. And some book covers. I'm trying to finish up this Tainted Fae and staying out of the heat. We're recording early again because we have vacation time coming up. So where we're at now in the world, it is incredibly sweltering and record-breaking temperatures and highs. And for all I know, that's going to be the next month as well. So I've been hiding from the heat and getting up extremely early so that if I want to exercise or do anything outside, it is done before 7 a.m. because you don't want to go outside after 7 a.m. Not if we've already discussed, I have that fly protein that your brain unwinds at above 80 degrees, and that's it for me. So I've got to stay inside and do very small, quiet things.
All right. Well, writing time is not too bad anyway. Yeah?
No.
Of course, if it gets too warm that you can't write, then that's a bit of a annoying thing to deal with.
Yes, well, that's my excuse for the AC. It's my dog, as we've talked about. He's a fizzy gig. He looks like a fizzy gig. He is as furry as a fizzy gig, and he gets hot, so I have to have an AC on. And then, for my poor computer's sake, I have to actually run an AC because that gets too hot and humid, and I can't write or I can't draw. That's the end of the world for me. So. And I've been working on some fun fantasy maps for other authors and some really cool book covers, and I don't want my computer to die on me, which means I probably shouldn't touch it.
It's that famous question of what would you bring to a desert island? It's just like my computer so I can make covers.
At the very least, pen and paper, like a giant sketchbook, because you can use that for writing or drawing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So how have things been for you?
Good, I guess. I got my first vaccine shot last Friday.
Right.
And I was sort of really crossing my fingers that I wouldn't get sick from it like some people have been. But I was actually okay. Friday, Saturday, I was fine. My arm was sore like it is for a lot of people. So that was fine. But then Sunday, Monday, and also part of today, I've just been so drained of energy and extremely tired.
Yeah, I had that too.
It's been a struggle for me as well. So I haven't got any writing done yesterday, none done today either. I just haven't had the energy. So I'm sort of fingers crossed that maybe I'll get some writing done tomorrow. But honestly, I feel like right now it's sort of up in the air whether or not. I don't know. I think it depends on how I feel tomorrow. I
can understand. Like I said, I went through the same thing. So if it suddenly goes quiet on the podcast and you only hear me talking, you've gone to sleep. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You can sort of clap your hands on the podcast and then that might wake me up.
All right. We'll have to, I will keep that in mind if I see the screen go dark and you're kind of off to the side.
Or if you hear a bump into the microphone, then it's just my forehead.
Like, wake up! All right.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Oh, but it took me a while to really put 2 and 2 together because we'd been traveling and a few other things, but I had that for like 2 weeks, so I hope it doesn't last that long for you, but I even started drinking iced coffees and stuff, and I'm not a coffee drinker. I'm like tea all the way, but I needed something because it felt like my whole life had gotten derailed, and I'm usually high energy. I mean, I'm actually low energy compared to my mom. You should meet her. She's like a tornado. I was fading, but right after lunch, and you're right. It's a tiredness where your brain is just like, you want me to put 2 words together? No, not gonna happen. Indeed. So I empathize.
Yeah, well, it's feeling slightly better today compared to yesterday evening. Even so, I hope, fingers crossed, by tomorrow that I'll be somewhat okay again. I'm not feeling bad or anything. I'm just tired. So,
well, now the big
at least
question,
I didn't get sick.
That's good. That is good. But the big question is, they're now saying mixing your vaccinations, your types, is a good thing. So, are you going to get the same thing again, or are you going to go get something different for your second shot?
It's the same one that I'm going to get for a second shot. And,
that's what I did.
And the nurse did say when I got this first shot, she said that mostly people have more after effects of the second one than the first one. So I'm expecting that it might be worse, but let's see.
It only lasted, I felt a little run down for maybe 12 hours, and then it was like, oh, I'm fine. I didn't have the same tiredness, so hopefully you'll feel the same way.
Yeah, we'll see.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy podcast.
The Verge reported on some interesting information that I thought it would be very good to share with people here on the podcast because it's highly relevant for us authors.
Yes.
So we talked a bit about this as well before the recording. So you're already in the loop here, Autumn, but
we've already strategized and discussed it because it does change how you run one of the most important things that you will have as an author if you're running a business.
Yeah, that was quite an efficient tease there, Autumn.
Thank you.
Once you think that you had recorded over 100 podcast episodes by now.
And most of them by the seat of my pants. Okay, go figure.
Don't say that. Just keep that to yourself.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That was a rookie mistake.
I am always prepared.
Yes, exactly. Well, I don't know if I said that you needed to lie, but you could just leave out information. That's not the same as lying. Now you were outright lying.
That's not true. I feel like I'm always prepared because I know it so well I don't need to do my homework.
Yeah, okay. Now you're just paddling instead.
Pretty much. Anyway, let's get back to the topic.
Anyway, we wanted to talk about an article in The Verge that they reported from one of Apple. Apple usually make announcements on its Worldwide Developer Conference, and one of the announcements that they made on the Worldwide Developer Conference was concerning email marketing. And obviously for us authors, email lists and being in touch with readers through email and so on is really, really important. So that, of course, made me pay attention.
Yes.
It's one of the cornerstones for us authors. And it's not only, of course, some email list is not only for building an audience, but also maintaining it. So what Apple announced was that what they call mail privacy protection. And what this means is that it's basically a way in which Apple will limit the amount of data that people who send you emails can collect about you. So all in all, I'm very supportive of that. I like the privacy protections in general, and I don't like when all the big corporations and whatnot collect information from what you're doing on the internet and so on. But that also applies to us authors, of course, because when we're sending out emails, there is in the email an invisible pixel that basically tracks in the sense that if the pixel gets loaded, which means that then the email was opened, then the information is sent back to the email provider. So that could be whatever email provider you use, like us, we use MailerLite. It could be MailChimp, ConvertKit, whatever one you use, right? But all of these vendors incorporate these invisible pixels to be able to tell you what your open rate is.
Exactly.
But when the fall comes, Apple will roll out the iOS update version 15. And within that iOS update, the Mail app will basically stop that invisible pixel from loading. And this also means that whenever you are sending emails to readers who are using Apple, then the tracking of the open rates will start become inaccurate. Or basically, it won't trigger the registration within the email provider.
Yeah.
So this also means that when you're looking at the metric called open rates, that's basically what is tracked via this pixel, then you need to understand that a certain percentage of the readers that actually opens the emails is telling you when you're looking at the open rates that they did not open it. So let me just do that again in case that was a bit confusing. So when you send your emails, the open rates will get tracked, but because this blocking is in place by Apple, this means that some people will open the email, but you won't know that they opened the email. So maybe that was a better way of putting it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So what does all of this mean to us authors? Well, in my view, I think we need to, first of all, of course, don't be like overly concerned and worried and now think that the world is falling apart and now email marketing will be worth nothing and so on. And that's not the case, right? So let's first of all take a deep breath and don't worry too much. It's not like nothing will work anymore. Email marketing is still the most important cornerstone of your author business, in my view. But there is, of course, a few things you need to be aware of. And one of the things that Autumn and I discussed today prior to this recording was that a pretty common best practice is to resend to unopened. So again, within your email provider, being MailChimp, ConvertKit, MailerLite, blah, 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 whatever it's called, they have always like an automated function where you can set up the system either automatically to resend to open ones, If I remember correctly, in ConvertKit, you have to do it manually, but they will track it, and you can go in and say, I want to resend this email to unopens, which is a smart thing to do, and it's like a best practice, and we've been doing it for a long time already. But what I would say is that since the tracking pixel doesn't register whether they opened it or not, this means that it will automatically be displayed as unopened. So if you then start resending emails, all the people on Apple devices, or at least all the people who haven't actively opted into wanting to be tracked, which I will assume will be a very, very small group of people who will actually opt into being tracked. So that means that let's just say all of it, or like 99% of the people using Apple devices. If you resend emails to unopens, you're going to send them the same email that maybe a lot of those people already read. And then they're going to get it again, which is going to annoy them a lot. It would annoy me a lot.
Yes, and then your unsubscribe rate is going to go up. So,
yes, then you will unsubscribe, because why are these people always sending me the same email twice? That's really annoying. Yeah. And I understand it. So the thing we discussed now was that come September, we will stop resending to unopens, and we'll just hope that people actually open the emails, because we can't trust that metric anymore.
Yeah.
And that's annoying, of course. But so is life, and life moves on, and we just adjust.
We'll adapt. It's fine. Yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind if you clean out your email list based on, people who don't ever open your emails. You might want to, send them an email beforehand with like a link to click or something that gets them to a survey. That's why we like MailerLite. There's so many like active things that people can do to answer questions and click on things and stuff like that. So you might want to make sure you do something before you delete someone, because they might be reading every single one, but they might be reading it on an Apple come September. And at that point, you're not going to know if they're reading it or not. So keep that in mind.
That's very right. That's exactly the other part of it. And what we do is we try to run what we call re-engagement campaigns. So that means that we are sending like 3-4 emails to see if we can get them to re-engage before we delete them. But even then, you need to be careful, because the way that we set up re-engagement campaigns normally is that if they then open the email, or of course also if they click something inside the email, we will remove the tag against their name for them to be deleted.
Right.
But again, that won't work anymore. No. So you can't even trust that. So you have to be, I think, very, very explicit in the emails that you send out, like telling them that you cannot tell whether or not they're reading your emails, and therefore you want to make sure. So if you are doing pruning of your list, meaning deleting people who are inactive, which I think it's a good practice to do. I also know a lot of people, also influencers in the author space, who do not agree that it's a good idea to prune the list. So take it as you will. But if it's something you do, then don't base your decision on deleting people on the open rates. No. So that's also a problem.
Yes. So a few changes, but we'll adapt. It's not that big of a deal. We'll survive. Unless you're really into metrics. If you're really into metrics, I'm so sorry. It's going to be bad metrics.
Yeah, indeed. So we will place a link to the article in the show notes. So if you want to check it out, and if you want to read what was more said in more details, then you can. But honestly, I just told you everything. So
sounds good. And I have one thing to share, even though it's not really to the author community, but I know they can celebrate with me.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, but over the weekend, Born of Water hit its 400th review. So, yay!
Did it? Wow.
That's my debut novel, so it is lovely to see it hit 400. It's when age counts.
Oh, that's so good. Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
400 reviews, that's not a small amount.
No, that's a nice round number. It's a big one. I like it.
Yeah. And also a very quick reminder before we move on to the topic of the day here. As mentioned last week, we've decided to offer everyone on our email list a massive discount for either of our flagship courses.
Yes.
And we will be mailing out a voucher code of $150 to be used on any of our courses.
I was going to say, you said 2 flagships, but we actually decided an hour ago it's going to be for a choice of 3 courses. So
yeah, why
that's
not?
a big deal. Yeah, that's quite a discount.
Yeah, so we have the Ultimate Fantasy Writer's Guide course, which is the writing guide or the writing course. We have the world building course, which, yeah, I guess you can guess what that's about.
Yeah, well, it's officially
then,
called Crafting Incredible Fantasy World, so we didn't call it world building. That would have been too easy.
And we also have, then that's the third one that we added into the pot, the email marketing course, which is very much on point about what we just talked about.
Go figure.
Yeah. So you can get $150 off of any of these courses, any one of them of your choice. Yep. And we placed a link in the show notes from where you can get onto our email list so that you will also get this email once we send out the vouchers. But if that's something interests you, I will urge you to get on the email list right now as you're listening to this, because I'm not going to say for sure when we're going to send out that voucher, but it's going to come in the next probably maybe 3 weeks or something like that. So if you forget about it and don't get signed up, then you're going to miss it. So you better get going.
Sounds good.
And on to today's topic.
Perhaps I'll just give you the reins here, Autumn, and maybe you can explain what we're talking about.
You're just doing that because I said I never did my homework and I do this by the seat of my pants. So you're like, okay, go for it.
Now I'm going to test it.
So I've already hinted about this at the beginning. So this topic is maintaining your story flow. And to me, this means sort of what I said before, that it makes the story, it's 2 parts. One, that when you have a reader reading it, it sounds like one cohesive story. It doesn't matter if it took you 5 years to write it, a decade, or if you're one of those insane fast writers, it took you a week. It all should still sound like it was one author written in one setting and story. It doesn't sound like it's all over the place where all these big life events happen in between. And the other thing is, as a writer sitting down to write it, that's the reader's response. But as a writer, you have life, jobs, personal things, COVID, all of these things that happen every single day, hopefully not that often, but things that interrupt your writing. And how do you maintain that story, almost enthusiasms? How do you keep that voice, that author's voice, the character's voice going so that you don't feel like you're coming back in going, I have no idea what I was writing and it doesn't make any sense and where was I going with that? So it's kind of those 2 principles I think we're really covering today, if you agree.
I like the idea for this podcast episode, Autumn, but it's also a very broad one. We can sort of go anywhere with it almost.
Absolutely. I think I was kind of like, the idea is to just help you keep that story vibe going. But there's so many different ways of doing that. And is one thing that was going to work for somebody might not work for you. So we're going to cover a couple of different things, I think.
All right. So where do we start?
Oh, well, to me, and I think you'll agree with this, is the best way to keep your story on track and flowing and so that you don't feel like lost is to have some sort of outline. Doesn't have to be a whole plot, but outline. I thought you would like that one. I mean, and we have those old YouTube videos. Maybe we can find the link to them and like how to make a half an hour story outline. It doesn't have to be something you spend days or weeks plotting, but to have a roadmap so that you know where you're at and where you're going. And that way, if you happen to be halfway or a quarter or 3/4, you can pick it up and go, oh yes, this is where I am. And you can go back on your route again and not get lost.
Yeah, I would say even better. Either go to AmWritingFantasy.com or go to Amazon or wherever you buy books and then just search for our name. And then you will find a book called Plot Development. And there is a full step-by-step guide there that we actually wrote on how to do the outline. And it will help you a lot.
It will help.
And even if you're a pantser, even if you don't like outlining, just try it out once. And then I will fully respect if you afterwards say, yeah, it's not for me. Fine. But I think it's important not to have an idea in your head that outlining is not for you if you haven't tried it. And there's a lot of those people out there. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of people who have prejudged that outlining is not for me. It doesn't work. That's not how I write. But they've never actually tried it. Yes. So I'd say just try it before you judge it. That's all I would say.
I agree. And having started as a pantser, and we all know that I'm the guinea pig and the spontaneous, and hey, you go do this, and I go and do it without thinking often. I've got to work on that. I can't believe I've made it this long in my life. But I went from pantsing to at least mildly plotting. I mean, that's why I developed first the half an hour outline. And now when we're writing together, we plot, and we plot pretty heavy. And the more I get into writing and the types of writing I like literary fantasy, and I like very involved subplots and plots. And you only get that if you are plotting, because it's too hard and tangled to do as a solid pantser. If anyone can keep that going, hats off to you, but I don't know how you can do that intense of a storyline without doing some plotting. So give it a try. It's amazing what comes out the other end. And as I said, I tend to be very much I live life as a pantser, and I'm a plotter when it comes to writing.
Yeah, and I would also go out on a limb and say that the people who say that they can do that, that's not right. I mean, I'm sure that the pantsers can make very, very elaborate plots and subplots and so on. But the thing is that the way that they do that is that they have to go over it many, many, many times and see it in and edit it and edit more to see it in new things and make things connect and so on. So, and that's of course also a way to do it. But yes, if we're talking about maintaining a flow, then it is easier when you have an outline and you know that everything is already connecting. You know all the foreshadowing is there. You set it up so you know exactly which beats to hit in which chapters and so on, and it just makes it easier.
It does. That's the case. I mean, even with even the outlining beyond the plotting, having a chapter outline and having a chapter flow where, you know, you have a hook at the intro and you have a developing problem and a climax, you know, a resolution, and that's usually tangles into the next chapter, or if you're skipping points of view, you know, having those things figured out. What's the next point of view? What is the next thing? What is the next hook? How's this chapter going to end? Having those aspects figured out really help you maintain this, just focusing on the story, focusing on the emotional plot or the character arc. That helps you maintain your flow. I mean, I always liked the idea that Einstein had 5 different suits. They were all exactly the same because he didn't want to have to stress his mind about what am I wearing. He had bigger things to think of. And when it comes to your story, it's the same thing. You have bigger things to think of than, oh, you know, how's this next chapter going to start off? Get all that figured out so you can just enjoy writing and the process of writing. And you don't have to spend half of your writing time, especially, I mean, like I said, when I had my full-time job, I would have time to have 45 minutes a night to write, or an hour and a half. And I still finished 4 books in a year because I had it all figured out. I knew when I came home, I could open it up, see where I was, read the last sentence and go, this is where I'm at. And I could just get to writing. I didn't have to worry about all the other stuff because it was set up ahead of time.
Yeah, and indeed. And if you don't like outlining, that sort of thing works for the pantser, right? I mean, if you think about the day before, where am I going to start the next chapter tomorrow, then that will help keeping the flow going, even if you don't have an outline.
Absolutely. That was some of my favorite tricks for myself, is when I realized, like, you're down to your last 5 minutes of writing time, you know, the family, they're in the background going, food, dinner, you know, are you ever coming out of there? Get off the computer. And you know that's coming, and you're like, okay, instead of writing and trying to finish up the scene, I would actually take a break and start making notes for myself. I would hit space a couple times, put it in bold or italics so that I knew this is just notes for myself. And I'd say, this is where I'm going. This is where the scene is going. This is where the next chapter is. Just brain dump everything that's in your head, because you know you're almost out of writing time. And the most efficient use for it, so that you'll be able to pick it up again faster next time, is to leave yourself some breadcrumbs. Make sure you do that. It's a fantastic way of wrapping up your writing. And then to tell them, look, I only need 5 more minutes. Please just give me this.
No, that's true. And I was also thinking that one of the things that I'm very much an advocate for in terms of keeping the flow and the writing going is to get the writing done before anything else. Meaning, like, if it's the first thing you do whenever you have the time, whether it's in the mornings or the evenings, that doesn't matter. But But if you do the writing before you do any of the other stuff, like maybe managing some ads or replying to emails or whatever it may be, sort of admin stuff that you have, if you do the writing first, then you're taking care of the most important thing first. And that helps a lot in terms of keeping the flow going. And you don't get sucked into, oh my God, it's now a week since I wrote last time because I've been doing all these other things. And maybe you got a lot done, but it hurts your writing. So prioritizing in that sense is important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it helped before. When I had the full-time job, I would often write when I got home, which wasn't my most creative time. It helps to know when your most creative time is. And for most people, it tends to be morning. Some people, it's after 11 p.m. and they're vampires. I have no idea how that's your creative time. But they do exist, I've been told. I've never met one, because I'm asleep at 11 p.m. But
you're not out and about at that time.
Rarely, very rarely, occasionally. But when I'm doing overnight drives to go see my parents, that's about the only time you'll catch me overnight, up at 1 a.m. Oh my goodness. But yeah, it's knowing when your creative time is and trying to set that as your writing time. But if nothing else, having either a set time, this is my writing time, and making your family understand that and not bother you. This is not when you're going to go Facebook and chat. You have to be good too. Turn off your Wi-Fi if you have to. I mean, I know we often use it to go do quick research, but leave yourself a blank. Come back and do the research later if you have to. Do it when you're editing. Try to stay offline, truly focus on writing. But I agree. Now that I'd rather get up earlier. Again, I'm in bed early, so 5 a.m. to me is not that bad of a thing. And if I can get an hour of writing in, my whole day is just glowing and set. I just love that. And it's sort of like the idea of, I'm not a huge exercise fan, but if I can get a little bit of exercise in and then get to writing, oh my gosh, that day is aced. I already feel like I've won the championship, and it's not even 7 a.m. yet.
Yeah, and I think as well when you said turn off the internet, that reminded me, because the fact that there are no disturbances around really helps a lot. So if you are currently in an environment or a place where you find yourself getting distracted all the time, then maybe you need to find a different place to do your writing. And some people like it when there are very many people around, like in a cafe or something, and there's noise. Some people like that noise level. Other people prefer it extremely quiet and isolated with a locked door almost. But it doesn't matter what it is, but I think it's important that you work out what works for you and try to make sure you create that sort of writing environment for yourself, because that will also, again, keep the flow going.
I agree. I mean, and it could be little things. I mean, where you write, the time of day, the clutter, whether or not, you can have a clean writing space often really works better for people, especially if you're still putting all your stuff in sticky notes instead of Scrivener files. And
who could be doing that?
Don't say anything about my sticky notes. I'm talking about actual sticky notes, not the one on my desktops. I love my stickies. They work very well. Anyway, I think we've been working together too long.
Probably. You only had to say one word and it triggered me.
You start laughing. You're like, oh, stickies, huh? I like stickies. But keeping the clutter, you want to be able to find your notes for your writing file. But I have to admit, even if I'm hitting a really bad writing patch and I just need that to know what you need to push yourself over the edge to get yourself in that mind space. I've told you that, and I've told the audience before, sometimes it would be keeping a page of George R.R. Martin. There's just some of this writing that just makes me go, wow, then I want to go write, because then I want to write like that. Sometimes, recently, that chapter that I just tried to finish, I had a whole bunch of notes and they weren't flowing together. I sometimes do that. I write backwards. I will just do scenes and then I'll have little breaks in between them. And I'm like, okay, I've got to make this into a whole thing. And I finally just, sometimes it's putting on headphones. I just put on a YouTube 3 hours epic fantasy music, and It helps. Sometimes having that background soaring music and battle scenes, and it was just like, oh, my brain said, okay, yeah, we're gonna write now. And so you need to figure out what your triggers are. What kind of little routine, if you do sit down with a cup of tea and listen to that music or read a paragraph, what do you need to do to make your mind go, yes, I am ready to write, and we're gonna keep this going.
And sometimes you're just stuck and you don't quite know what is supposed to happen next in this story, and I can't quite work out the character or whatever it may be. And I think here it's very, very good to go outside, go for a walk, and put it aside for a bit, and go out and don't think about what should happen. Just let inspiration come to you, because it will your mind will be working on solving the problem without you even thinking about it. That's exactly why sometimes you will experience that when you're in the shower or you're out doing grocery shopping, then all of a sudden it pops into you, oh, I know what it is now. And that's because your mind is working on it. So just sometimes accept the fact that your mind needs a bit of time to work on the problem, and then go for the walk, go do something else, whatever it may be. I do feel like fresh air is a very good thing. But the main thing, whatever you do, don't start jumping to the new shiny story idea that you got and leave this one behind, because then the other one feels easier to go to because you're not stuck there yet. You have to finish the stuff you're working on. And I know that some people like to have multiple projects that they juggle, and fine, if that's what you like, then. But at least from my point of view, I will never give the advice that you should be jumping into new projects all the time, because the fact that you can prove to yourself that you can finish something is massively important. And even if that then means that today you're going to go for a walk and you're not going to do any more writing until tomorrow, and once you've slept on and allowed your mind to work on solving the problem at hand, then that's fine. But don't just put it aside and start writing something new, because chances are you will also hit a roadblock in the new project. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to jump to the new one again? And you see, all of a sudden you have 10 unfinished manuscript on your computer. And because every time you get stuck, you jump to something new. Instead, you have to teach yourself how to overcome those obstacles and actually finish the work.
I agree. And I would say usually the best ideas come to me not in the shower, but usually when I have like 3 things on the stove. And that's always when you get a good idea and you're like, darn it. That's why I always keep note paper, like stickies, around so I can take a quick note and not forget, because writing down those ideas will also help you keep going so you can add them. Like, that's why I do love Scrivener. I can just say, oh, I got this idea for a scene, and I stick it in the chapter where I know that needs to be. I love being able to do that. So when I get to that chapter, it's already sitting there waiting for me. But I do.
And the corkboard in Scrivener has what looks like sticky notes, so that's probably nice as well.
They were thinking of me. But I definitely agree. I always had this rule that if I had only been sitting down for 15 minutes and I was stuck, I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave until I hit that 15-minute or 20-minute mark. I had to at least try to write and work on my story for those 15 to 20 minutes, because it is. Your brain is like, I don't want to do this. I want to go to Facebook. I don't want to do this. I want to go do something else. But if you can get into it, you'll usually push past that and keep writing. And sometimes I would need to not maybe work on exactly what I thought I was going to write on the story, but I'd have to sink into the character's head saying, okay, what is the character seeing right now? Was it raining? Is it what, just kind of pull myself into the story. And I might end up cutting out that stuff. Maybe there will be bits I keep because it's a really good description and really places, the reader into the character's head. But I have to admit, if I've been there for 15, 20 minutes and I have put in an honest effort and I haven't been jumping off to Facebook or something, I agree. Sometimes just saying, what else can I do? I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to let this sit, because sometimes that's all you can do. However, I will admit there was a time I was working on 2 projects in tandem, and I thought it was fantastic because I would write, like I'd have a goal of 4 chapters in one and just half a chapter in the other one. And if I hit those glitches where it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot think what happens next, this character is not flowing, especially that story, it had a politician, and I've talked about that before. I don't do politician very well. It was so hard to write in his voice. But then I could switch to the other one saying, okay, I'm going to do that half chapter and jumping between them worked very well, but I had written over a trilogy at this point, and it was not fresh out of the, gate. I had earned my little stripes, and I knew I could do it, and I only stuck to both of those, and I managed to continue and get it done. So it worked. So if you have a blog maybe, or short stories, or Vella is a good thing, and as long as they're in the same vein and you don't switch to new ideas, but you actually have two side by side, like parallel projects, and one's your main project, but maybe you're going to write a quick Vella story to go with it to get some new reader interest, that can work. Sometimes maybe if your brain is like mine on a squirrel on cocaine, that will work really well. It'll work really well for you if you work in chaos.
Just, speeding up and down the trees, carrying sticky notes and putting sticky notes on trees that might not sign this tree.
That's right. Now you know what my brain looks like.
And also related to what we were just talking about, I think pro athletes, for example, they often visualize the outcome that they want. So they visualize in their case, for example, what does it feel like to cross the finish line as number one or whatever, if it's a running or if it's a soccer game, which I like a lot, then visualizing how does it feel, or how does the ball curve in the air when I score the goal and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But if you haven't proved to yourself that you can finish work yet, and you're in that rut of things where you're a bit stuck and you can't quite figure out how to move ahead, and you really wanted to jump to that new project because it sounds so much more exciting right now than this dreadful middle of the novel you are stuck in, then I think try to copy a bit what these pro athletes do. Try to visualize in your mind, what will it feel like once I have the novel done? Mm-hmm. How will I feel about it? And then hang on to that feeling, right? And try to channel that feeling into forcing yourself to actually write it, because you know that by the end of it, I'm going to get to this place where I know how good it feels. Yeah. That's another way that you can try to trick your mind to battle that challenge that you're facing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that can sometimes just give you the energy to push through some of those really tough chapters, to say, okay, especially with the 7 steps of story structure, okay, I'm stuck in the reaction phase, but how cool is it going to be when I get to write that horrible scene of, the dark moment that happens, what flips the whole whole book. And, when you start thinking, okay, what's it going to feel like to finally get to write the climax and this big, wonderful thing that happens? And that can keep you going as well, especially when you realize what it's going to feel like to finish it. And when you spoke of visualization, that made me think sometimes having a writing session, sometimes you get so stuck and bogged down in the intricacies of each chapter that beginning and ending a writing session with a quick look over your synopsis or blurb or your 2 sentences that kind of are your theme for the novel. Step back and make sure you're still on track. Remember, this is what the story's about, and get yourself excited about the whole arc of it again. Sometimes that could help get you going as well.
Very true. And I have another one, and it might sound a bit weird at first, but there is logic to the madness here.
Sure there is.
The thing is that you might actually want, if you feel like keeping the flow is a challenge for you, you might want to try out dictation. Oh. And I know the default reaction of many people is like, no, thank you. I don't want to dictate anything. That's crazy. And fine, yes, you might say that. We did actually, by the way, have a podcast episode in the past about dictation, so you can go and search that one out if you want to hear more about how to go about the dictation. But my point about it is more that dictating your story will increase your writing speed significantly. And sometimes when you have things that keeps, pulling you off and distracting you or interrupting your flow, if you can just churn out the chapters quicker, you will also just get the writing out of the way, in the sense that then you're going to prevent those things from interrupting you, because you already got the writing done, because you can dictate a ton more faster than you can ever write. So that's something you might want to try out. Just see if it works for you, or go back and listen to that past episode we had on dictation, and get some good tips and guidelines from that episode, and then go and test it out and see if it works for you.
Yes.
And just like before, when we talked about outlining, don't say no to something you haven't tried.
I agree.
It's like talking to kids, isn't it? You can't say you don't like it until you did it. You tasted it.
That's right. And no fake spitting it out just because you want to think you're right. No, I think you have to have a little bit of a logical brain for dictation. But again, I think anyone can learn to do it, and it really does help get ideas down very quickly. And so it has a spot. I think it's very useful. And I think, just to wrap up, because I mentioned that story flow is also the reader's experience. So how to make a book that maybe took you a year and a half, even longer to write, sound like a cohesive whole. I hate to say it, the big tip is editing. Make sure you self-edit. I would say I like content editing. Before you proofread, read the whole thing. Get maybe an alpha reader to read the whole thing and point out the places where things are out of line and out of junk, especially if you don't know how to do it. It's your first book and you can't see the forest for the trees. Get an alpha reader, get a mentor, find a content editor, have them look it over, and they'll point out the places where things are kind of kinked off a little bit. That way the reader doesn't go, okay, did we start a different story halfway through? Is this a different author picked up? Occasionally I do find books like that, but it's usually not as bad as the author thinks, but it definitely only comes about by editing, because only if you are one of those really crazy productive authors who can sit down and write 50,000 to 80,000 words in a single week. We're both professionals, and I've never hit that kind of level. And I don't know if I'd enjoy it. I think that's beyond my enjoyment of writing, and I still want to kind of have fun playing with words. So I'm never going to write quite that fast, because I don't want to. So
that's why you edit.
That's why, well, I like writing. I just don't want to write 100,000 words in a week. That's just no fun. You get to spend time with your characters that way. 2 months, that'd be good. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, if I could, I probably would.
Crazy.
But I think, based on this conversation, at least what we can conclude is that there isn't one magic bullet to resolve this situation. And be looking for a magic bullet, that feels like something we've said before about being that there isn't one.
No, there doesn't. No magic beans, but we're still looking. But definitely no magic bullets.
No. And I think what we can also conclude is that we are all different, and that's okay. And I think, based on the things that we covered here, the main takeaway is probably that maybe we said something that inspired you, that you want to go and try. If you feel like maintaining that story flow is a difficult thing, then maybe try one of the things we said, and maybe something sort of clicked with you. And then some of the other ones we mentioned might not, and that's fine. Then you leave those alone. But I think we're all different. So
yeah,
you have to find your own way.
Exactly.
All right, so next Monday, we'll be looking at pre-sales versus pre-orders. What's the difference, and is one better than the other?
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the AmWritingFantasy podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jasper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the AmWritingFantasy podcast going. Stay safe out there, and see you next Monday.